Now, as I announce this first joke, I will let you know that the first service it bombed. So I just kind of want to forewarn you here. So we'll see how it goes. Several years ago, there was a lawyer and doctor that were playing golf together, and they were evenly matched. And so as you might imagine, there was a keen sense of rivalry between the two. Till one spring, when the lawyer's game kept improving, and the doctor started losing regularly. The doctor's efforts to improve were unsuccessful. Until he came up with an idea. He went to the bookstore, got 3 books on how to improve your game in golf, and then sent them to the lawyer for his birthday. It wasn't long before they were evenly matched again. Okay, all right, I'm glad some of you got that joke. Thank you very much. Woo. What you find here is a doctor who was a bit cunning and crafty. Today we have a new sermon series that I think is an appropriate one as we begin the season of Lent. Over the next 6 weeks, we are going to hear some very interesting and unusual stories about the judges of Israel. Now, the judges were leaders that the Hebrew people turned to before Israel had a king. These are not legal scholars. These are not the black-robed men and women that we think of today. Judges were just charismatic leaders. Many of them were soldiers. But these were people that Israel turned to when they needed God's guidance, or when Israel was in trouble, or when the Hebrew people found themselves in a time of crisis. And what we're going to find throughout these next 6 weeks is that the judges are not perfect people. All of them, we could say, are broken. They led a broken people to follow, thankfully, a very faithful God. As was illustrated briefly with our children today, we're going to hear the story of Ehud, a crafty and cunning leader as he leads Israel after a very peculiar story. So, Jamie, would you share the story as what Scripture tells us?
Today's reading comes from Judges 3, verses 12 through 30. Again, the Israelites did evil in their eyes of the Lord. And because they did this evil, the Lord gave Eglon, king of Moab, power over Israel. Getting the Ammonites and Amalekites to join him, Eglon came and attacked Israel, and they took possession of the city of palms. The Israelites were subject to Eglon, king of Moab, for 18 years. Again, the Israelites cried out to the Lord, and he gave them a deliverer, Ehud, a left-handed man, the son of Griah the Benjamite. And the Israelites sent him with tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. Now Ehud had made a double-edged sword about a cubit long and strapped it to his right thigh under his clothing. He presented the tribute to Eglon, king of Moab, who was a very fat man. After Ehud had presented the tribute, he sent on their way those who had carried it. But on reaching the stone images near Gilgal, he himself went back to Eglon and said, "Your Majesty, I have a secret message for you." The king said to his attendants, "Leave us," and they all left. Ehud then approached him while he was sitting alone in the upper room of his palace and said, "I have a message from God for you." As the king rose from his seat, Ehud reached with his left hand, drew his sword from his right thigh, and plunged it into the king's belly. Even the handle sank in after the blade, and his bowels discharged. Ehud did not pull the sword out, and the fat closed in over it. Then Ehud went out to the porch. He had shut the doors of the upper room behind him and locked them. After he had gone, the servants came and found the doors of the upper room locked. They said he must be relieving himself in the inner room of the palace. They waited to the point of embarrassment, but when he did not open the doors of the room, they took the key and unlocked them. There they saw their lord fallen on the floor, dead. While they waited, Ehud got away. He passed by the stone images and escaped to Seirah. When he arrived there, he blew a trumpet in the hill country of Araphim, and the Israelites went down with him from the hills, with him leading them. "Follow me," he ordered, "for the Lord has given Moab, your enemy, into your hands." So they followed him down and took possession of the fords of the Jordan, and that led to Moab. They allowed no one to cross over. At that time they struck down about 10,000 Moabites, all vigorous and strong, not one escaped. That day Moab was made subject to Israel, and the land had peace for 80 years.
Thank you, Jane. Now, I'm guessing that if we did a survey here, we probably were not too familiar with this passage. I have a hunch that as we're going to be moving through the book of Judges throughout the season of Lent, that our reaction is probably going to be very similar to this episode of The Simpsons. So, go ahead and play it here.
Well, children, it's Saturday night, so what say we let our hair down and play bombardment? Yay! Oh, Bible questions. Yay! Which version shall it be?
St. James! The Vulgate of St. Jerome!
Vulgate it is. Okay, for one gold star, what Persian king exempted the Levites from taxation?
Artaxerxes!
Radio! Well?
I know!
No, somebody gotta let Bart and Lisa get one. Come on, this one's easy.
We give up.
Well, guess. Book of Revelations, fire-breathing lion's head, tail made out of snakes. Who else is it gonna be?
Jesus?
Jeez! Don't you kids know anything? The serpent of Rehoboam? The well of Zohassadar? The bridal feast of Beth Chadruharazeb?
Wait, that's the kind of thing you should start learning at baptism. Actually, you see, we are never baptized. Nettie! Nettie! Nettie!
I'll tell you, I didn't even know most of that stuff that Ned was talking about there. These are stories that we don't hear too much about and rarely hear about this time period in Israel. So let us kind of review here a little bit about what's taking place. This kind of begins in the early history of Israel. If you remember, the Hebrew people, they're stuck in Egypt, they're under slavery, they escape, they get into the promised land, but when they get into the promised land, they are not a united people. In fact, they're what, you've probably seen this map before, they're 12 distinct tribes, and they have their own region, and they rarely ever do anything together. But as these tribes get together, they have kind of this common past where they, someone turn on the, somebody, okay, all right. What happens is they have a common past, which is Egypt. They came out of Egypt, and there is a common future. They believe strongly in the promised land. What does this sound like? Kind of sounds like our own history of the 13 colonies. The reason we are called United States is for a reason. The people in South Carolina didn't care what was going on in Massachusetts. The people in Virginia had no kinship with those in New Hampshire, but who did they hate? They hated Britain. There was a common past, and they shared the common area of the motherland. But it took some 15 years, if you look at our own American history, for the United States to truly come together. Same with what's going on in Judges. Judah didn't care about what was going on in Gad. Issachar didn't go along with Asher. Now, sure, centuries later, Israel was united under King Saul and then eventually David and Solomon. But right now, it was every tribe for themselves. That was fine until a crisis comes along. In this period of biblical history, we have between some 13 to 15 judges who lead Israel in a time of crisis. And as the judges, you see the same pattern emerge. First, the tribes do evil in the sight of the Lord. Then they get oppressed by an outside foe. Third, they cry out for God. And then fourth, God brings a deliverer, someone who is called a judge to be with them. And then there's this time of peace and prosperity. And then once again, the tribes do evil in the sight of the Lord. And the cycle goes on again and again and again. This happens 15 times in the book of Judges. Now, the first judge is a guy by the name of Othniel. At this point, Israel becomes subject to the king of of Aram, a neighboring kingdom. And after 8 years of oppression, the Israelites call out to God. And Othniel comes. He's a judge, throws off the yoke of oppression, and they have 40 years of peace. That's when we get to Ehud. Ehud is the second judge, but the first in our lesson throughout Lent. So go ahead and say it with me, Ehud. There you go. So if you learn anything, you now know how to pronounce Ehud. There you go. Now, Israel did, as the scripture says, did evil in the sight of the Lord. We don't quite know what the evil was, but we know it leads to 18 years of Moabite oppression. Now, if you think of yourself, Moabites, Moab, where have I heard that name? I want you to hold on to that thought just for a second. Because now I want to talk about our subtitle for today. Ehud, Lefty v. Hefty. First, the Hefty part. Now, I've read a lot of scripture as a pastor over my 18 years as a pastor. And you can only read the same scripture over and over and over before you start asking some questions. For one, do we really need to know that the king is fat? I mean, think about it. I mean, what does that add to the story? And then, why in the bathroom? How do we know this? When they saw that the doors of the roof chamber were locked, they thought he must be relieving himself in the cool chamber. Scholars are pretty convinced that this is the king's private room, his privy or his bathroom. And then 3, what's with all the gory details? I mean, this is really descriptive. You got a fat king. You got dirt coming out of him. This takes place in the bathroom. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, these are all valid questions. And, this is the Bible. You can answer it, well, this is the Bible. This is just an eyewitness account. Or this is an oral culture. I mean, this is where you pass on a story from one person to the next. So I can just imagine, like, for example, the Peterson family. You're not going to forget the details of the story as you tell your kids. It's really hard to forget that. But I want to offer a third alternative. And that really goes to the heart of our Lenten lesson for today. We are a broken people. Moab is the hated enemy of Israel. And last year we learned in a sermon series that King David, great-grandma, is from Moab. And this is shocking. The greatest king in all of Israel's history is descended of a Moabite. And Israel believes that nothing good comes out of Moab. The Bible, through the eyes of Israel, tell us that the Moabites loved violence, they loved to steal, and worse, they were an incestuous people. Israel loved to tell the story of Lot and his daughters. What happens here in the Bible is there's an earthquake. And Lot and his daughters believe that they're the only people on the earth. And so his daughters go to their dad and say, we need to repopulate the earth, but we're the only people. And so what does Israel do? They continue to say to the Moabites, you are descendant of that incestuous relationship. And they continue to tell the story and remind the Moabites about it. You see, we are a broken people, and we still have problems with our enemies. We like to gossip about those we don't like. I take a coworker that we can't stand, or it's getting all the attention, or is about ready to take our job, or is about angling for that promotion that we think we need. All it takes is a juicy story, a bit of gossip, even if it's true about that person, and we just kind of pass it right along. As an elder in the United Methodist Church, it is my job to be, as an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church, to be assigned to pastors that have never been to seminary. And so one time I was working with a pastor that was really struggling. He was at this church, and he was new at this church, and it just seemed like there was some certain families that he could never connect with, and they were always criticizing him. And so I was working with him, and we were trying to figure out what was going on. And it kind of dawned on us, is these families that he was not connecting with continued to call the previous pastor. When the new pastor changed the worship service, did they tell the new pastor about it? No, they called the previous pastor to complain. When the new pastor's wife did not move to the community, who did they call but the previous pastor's wife? to complain. When the new pastor did not memorize his sermons like the previous pastor did, who did they call? Not the pastor first relations committee. They called the old pastor to complain. Now, what that old pastor should have said was, I am not your pastor anymore. What you need to do is you need to tell the pastor first relations committee this, or you need to talk to your pastor. But instead, he listened to the gossip. At one point, his wife even called me to share a bit of the juicy gossip of what was taking place at the guy that replaced her husband. Now, the gentleman did get a visit from the district superintendent, but not before listening to all the juicy stuff about how things were unraveling after he left that church. My friends, we are a broken people, and we have no problem rejoicing at the stumblings of those we don't like, or anything else that makes us feel better at another person's expense. Why does Israel love the Hefty story? Because it makes fun of the Moabite king. It doesn't make him very royal and regal by murdering him in the bathroom. It's easier to tell our kids this story and kind of relieve the guilt after slaughtering 10,000 Moabite enemies. We are a broken people. And we have no problem talking about our enemies. We have no problem demonizing those we don't like, those we don't understand, those who are different, those who are born on the wrong side of the fence, those who don't hold our allegiance. Sure, he's hefty, but he's also hated. We are a broken people. Now on to the lefty part. Ehud comes from the tribe of Benjamin. Now in Hebrew, Benjamin just means son of my right hand. And Lefty, think about it, comes from a right-handed tribe. Now why is this unusual? Well, the people in the Middle East have a problem with left-handedness. It's not natural. You shake hands with your right hand. You salute with your right hand. You fight with your right hand. And what do you do with your left hand? Well, in the days before toilet paper, you used your left hand. You think I'm joking? Look it up. And even today, when you have toilet paper, which hand do you use? The left hand. We even have a part in our own history. My grandfather, when he went to school, was forced to use his right hand, even though he was left-handed. I one time told this story in a church that I served. That was a Lutheran school a couple miles out in the country, and I was told by one of my parishioners that he remembers when they had a left-handed student that they would often have their left arms tied to the desk so they could be forced to use the right hand. As I said, we are a broken people, and we do some broken-hearted stuff to God's people. That's why God has to be quite crafty and cunning in order to be faithful. Look who God chose to be a judge. In our society, no one is supposed to be left-handed. So what happens, think about it. The judge puts the sword in his right hip pocket because my lightsaber keeps going off. There you go. So what happens is when he goes and is checked by the guards, everyone's thinking, well, no one's going to have the sword in his right hip pocket because only good people in that society use their left hand is only for toilet paper use. They would never check to see what was in the right side. So how does Ehud get through the guards? He's got the sword right here, and he takes care of the enemy of Israel. That's why I think I absolutely love this character about God. God's crafty. God's cunning. And despite our brokenness, which is that ability to hate, that ability to label, to ability to judge others are different, God is still faithful to us. As we will learn throughout these lessons, we do evil in the sight of God. We cry out to God for help. God listens, and God sends us a judge. Today, we call that judge Jesus. We are a broken people. We're going to be talking about the brokenness throughout the season of Lent. But God, it continues to be faithful to us. Amen. At this point, we will ask our ushers to wait upon us as we give back to God.